Welcome back, boils and ghouls. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. We are joined again by Mr. Don Chin. Last time he was on, I spent an inordinately long time grilling him about Sam Keith, and we had a little bit of time to talk about how he was getting back into comics, and I thought that we would have another conversation with Don tonight and talk a little bit more about what he's up to these days. And we also talked a little bit about zines in that interview. And I think that's a very important community, and it's something that Don's very knowledgeable about. So I'm very excited to talk to him about that. I hope you guys enjoy. So let's hop on in. How you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Jerk. Or Roman, whatever you prefer. I'm not sure what to call you.
Call me whatever
Bro.
you want.
Hey, bro. I'm doing great, bro. It's so good to see you, man. You look healthier, and I saw a post on your channel. You looked like you were out down for the count, and things were looking a little bleak for you, but you rebounded. So hopefully you're feeling good.
Oh, dude, that time in the hospital, like having a tube shoved down my throat, not being able to talk, gave me time to think. And all I could think about was the channel. So I'm like all
Uh,
redoubled and focused. And I'm excited, man. I'm really
yeah.
excited about where the channel is going to go. So, um, the last time you were on, like I said, we talked a inordinate amount about Sam Keith. But we did talk about Berserker and X-Farce Reloaded, which were coming out. And
Right.
unfortunately, my schedule is hectic and I am just a flaky guy. And I didn't get the chance to talk to you while the stuff was going on, while the crowdfunding was going on. But
That's
those,
all right.
but they came
Yeah.
out and everything, right? How's everything been going with the with
It,
Berserker?
okay. So x-farce was one that we launched in January, and it fulfilled in April. So that was a pretty quick Indiegogo campaign. It was kind of something I wanted to do to get my feet wet because I hadn't done crowdfunding before. I just kind of was a bystander watching other people do it and being quite successful at it. So I really didn't know how well it would do. So I set our bar kind of low. So I said, if we make a couple thousand, we're going to go to press with this. And we actually wound up making almost $8,000 on the campaign. And we published about, all told, between the three variant covers, we did about 1,000 copy print run. So it's very low print run compared to the Eclipse days, because back in the 90s when we did X-Farce with Eclipse and Bill Mouse and I, that was our first project together, it sold like 80,000 copies. So the market has changed so much since the 80s, and we don't really use distributors as much as we used to. But so that book funded, and I send you a copy? I think I didn't I?
You did, and it looked
Okay, you got it.
amazing, man. And it came with a
Cool.
card and everything. It's for anybody who's wondering, it is legit. This is not like some like weird knockoff indie parody book. Like you can tell Don's been at it a while. I was really taken aback by the quality. It looked amazing, man.
Thank you. Yeah, I was really happy with it, being kind of rusty and not doing the whole pre-press thing that we, used to do. My wife and I had to kind of dust off our computers and fire that up. But my wife's a graphics wizard. I mean, I couldn't do half of this stuff without her. So that book came out and it's been well received. You can see people reviewing it on YouTube. You can just type in like X-Farce Reloaded, and there's people unboxing it and getting excited. So we did well with that. And, we didn't skimp on the printer. We used the best paper that we could find. And I don't know, Roman, if you remember back in the 90s or even the 80s, Marvel was predominantly using newsprint. And then when Marvel Fanfare came out, they used this really nice kind of a glossy Baxter type stock. It was really nice. So when I saw the paper quality on X-Farce and that I could get that on that book, it was an upgrade. I mean, I wasn't planning on going that type of paper, but when I thought, for 30 cents more, I can really give this book a premier looking, feel to it. And so that's what we did. We spent extra money on the book and it turned out great. And so we're going to use that printer again on Berserker. So Berserker is the current crowdfunding campaign that we only have like 4 days left on. And that one, my goal on that one was 7,000, and we're about 500 short on that. So I think we're going to make it. We have a few different promotional streams that we're going to be on. So, so that book, my plan is to get that out in the next 2 or 3 months. So that's looking good too.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
So what was your experience with the crowdfunding? It's kind of crowdfunding for me is interesting because it's very different and it's very new. It much more falls on the creator to do basically everything, all the promotion and all of that stuff. But for somebody like you, that's something you're basically intimately familiar with. And I feel like it's almost a callback to those days of having a much more intimate, direct relationship with the people who are buying your books and stuff, as opposed to, hey, okay, I'm going to make this book and then I'm going to sell it to Diamond, and then Diamond's going to sell it to comic shops, and then comic shops will sell it to people, and then maybe the people will find me. So what was your experience?
I'd say I like it. It's different because, when we were publishing with mainly Diamond in the 90s with Parody Press and Entity Comics and stuff, we had maybe a dozen distributors, and then they all kind of, unfortunately, there was a big crash in the late 90s and a lot of them went out of business. But back in that day, your main PR was either Diamond's Previews magazine or Wizard or Hero Illustrated. Comic Scene was, that came along a little bit later, but it really wasn't the same as Wizard and stuff. It was, you've covered Comic Scene. So there was just a handful of press outlets. You didn't, we used to have CompuServe and Prodigy. We didn't have the social media like Twitter, Facebook and stuff. So, and graphics were so slow loading on a 1200 baud modem. You'd have to wait like 10 minutes just to load like a color graphic. So it really wasn't practical to use the internet to promote. You would just have text and you just kind of let people know you're coming out with something. But the main thing that we used back in the day was you'd have to spend money in previews, like either buy a full color ad or put in a poster or something that was going to catch the retailer's eye, because that's who you were trying to appeal to, was the retailers, so they would buy your book, and then the fans let the retailers know, I want this book, but ultimately it's the retailer that's putting out the money to get those books. So with crowdfunding, you are appealing directly to the consumer one-on-one, and it's, I'm used to being a salesman. That's what I do, on my other job, but going in front of people, like having a screen presence like you do and so many YouTubers do, that's not something my generation is used to. So I was really apprehensive. I mean, people said, oh, come on my stream and, promote your book and, I'll interview you on Zoom or something. So I'm looking and I'm thinking, okay, it's easy to be a guest on these shows, but now I think from what I've seen successful people do, they'd have their own channels and they stream multiple times a week. And that's what it takes to build that audience, because the more viewers and subscribers you have to your channel or your Twitter handle or whatever, the more I think that translates to the more success you might have selling your product. So I kind of had to start from the ground on up and build up a YouTube channel and my Twitter page and Facebook. And so I'm pretty savvy on the web stuff, but as far as the streaming stuff, I really wasn't comfortable with, being a host and stuff, but I'm used to it now. But learning that StreamYard software, I was a little bit apprehensive. I mean, my first streams that I did, I was just fumbling around and, making the screen not the right size. And it was kind of a comedy of errors, but now I know how to do it and I can handle the show with multiple guests without having a producer. And you just kind of have to plan ahead of time. You set up graphics and links and all that stuff. So I feel so much more at ease now than I did back in January when I started to do streams. So that's kind of been the biggest learning curve, is just learning, how to market yourself and your company to the world that's out there rather than to the retailers and the comic book shop fans.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that angle actually, because obviously I'm only a fan. And like, yeah, you can have some people will pre-order stuff, you know, through previews and all of that stuff. But I was always the weird guy out. You know, they were like, you actually look for the books that you want to order from previews. Well, yeah, man. I mean, I want to get the books off of the stands, but everybody complains about being at the mercy of the guys who, that's why you're at the mercy of the guys at the shops.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I think it's interesting with crowdsourcing, because I think it's kind of eliminating a lot of that. But it's, I don't know, it's so weird because it's such a strange hybrid between almost like mail order back in the day, if you remember mail order, you know?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like mail order, except you got to be like you said, you have to be the salesman selling your mail order now. It's so crazy.
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah,
imagine.
you know, that's a good I guess to me that's a good observation, Roman, is that the mail order thing, because when you crowdfund, I mean, I had to buy like a huge crate of these Gemini mailers, you know, these things that, you know, with bubble wrap, and these are what everybody uses to ship their books in so they don't get damaged by the postal service. So, you know, back in the day with Diamond, you would just know how many copies you had to print to send in Diamond, and your printer would send them directly to them in, you know, cases of like 250 books a box, and you wouldn't have to even see the books physically except the extra copies that you might want to keep in stock. So now with crowdfunding, you can have people that are printers on demand ship the books out for you as a service, and they'll charge you. But I thought, to save money, I'm going to have to do this myself. So I get, you know, 1,000 books, 1,000 Gemini mailers. I've got comic book bags and boxes. So like when I got off work at night after X-Farce was printed, I would basically come home and fulfill these packages. And it was a lot more work, you know, to sell, you know, 500 copies, one individually, and wrap them individually and send them out with labels. So my wife and I were just going, you know, this is for people that are successful doing this, you know, people like Ethan Van Sciver or Brian Pulido or Billy Tucci. These guys are, you know, their campaigns are making $250,000 to $1 million, and they're selling, you know, probably 7,000 to 10,000 copies of each book. And I have my hands full just with under 1,000. So it's a lot more work than you know, I can see why people are getting warehouses to do this type of thing, because I'm, you know, I'm crowding out my downstairs office, and if I panned around this room, you'd say, what a mess. So it was fun. I mean, I almost think, man, I wish I could get my grandkids to do this fulfillment for me, but I don't trust them enough. They're going to have dirty fingers, and, you know, everybody that's a collector, you're paying $20 for a comic book. You don't want it to look like a, you know, like a sloppy teenager packed it. So I kind of took the control and, you know, control reins and started to pack it myself. And I don't mind. I kind of take pride in that. And I put in a nice little thank you letter that I hand signed with each order. And that's something that I feel is a nice personal touch that you can add when you don't have that same ability. When back in the old days, you know, your comic would just go out to the shops, and, you know, you might call the shop or you might do an appearance and you meet them, but you don't really call them up and say thank you for supporting our books.
I loved the sign note because you actually sent one along, and I was like, oh man, that's really cool. And like your eye for detail is just aw. I loved like for like anybody who's thinking about getting one, I didn't even throw my packaging away because I had to keep it because
Yeah.
there's X-Farce Reloaded tape on it, and I was like, this is awesome, man.
Yeah.
And like the card that comes with it is totally a throwback to those the 90s Fleer cards, which I am just
Right.
absolutely obsessed with. I was like, oh man, this is itching every nostalgia, but oh yes.
Awesome. Yeah. We've got let me show you if the viewers on this, you know, the replay, if you guys want to get X-Farce, we still have copies. You can just go to xfarce.com. And so the card that you're talking about is this one that Mark Lewis did. and we put them in a nice little, clear protective holder. So that, that turned out really well. And then that tape you were talking about. So this is the tape for Berserker.
Oh, nice.
So they come in a big roll like this, Roman. But when I first ordered the tape, I thought it was just going to be one that you can put in a tape gun that had its own sticky back on it. But this tape is it's got that fiber in it, and you have to wet it with the sponge. So you get it from a company called Sticker Mill. So they send, I was thinking, do I actually have to physically cut every strip that I want to use and wet it and put it on the packaging? And the answer is yes. And I just thought, oh, this would have been so much easier to have plastic tape that I could just put in a gun and do. But I do like the feel of the canvas tape, and it's got a nice nostalgic feel to it. But I didn't know that I was going to be extra work, so I had to cut all the strips and individually put it on each package that went out. So it's okay.
That's awesome. I'm sorry. That's just another level of when I got the package, you can really tell that this is a labor of love for you. It's not necessarily about making $1 million or trying to sell 80,000 copies again,
Right.
It's just,
right.
I want to make a comic book, and I want to make a really good comic book. The paper quality was great. Like the card.
Thanks,
bud. The card, when you flip over the card, it's got a write-up of Jack Kirby. I was like, yes, okay, these guys have done everything. We can just check all the boxes. You've done everything right, sir.
That was my wife's idea. I was thinking, we knew that we were going to put this image on the front. And then I thought, what do we put on the back? Just slapping on the logo wouldn't be the same. Or I didn't know what to put on. And my wife says, I got an idea. And she just blew me away, because she said, come over to the computer and look. And, she had the bio of Jack Kirby from Wikipedia. And I said, that is spot on. Because we want to honor the guys that inspired the x-farce, X-Cons, X-Men, and that's Kirby and Lee. And unfortunately, both of those guys have passed. But I don't think Kirby gets enough love. Lee kind of got his adoration, especially after all the Marvel Universe movies came out. But Kirby, to me, was kind of a forgotten hero, and I think he's instrumental in my love of comics, and to be able to kind of throw some love back to him was really cool.
Yeah, no, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko. There's a very short list of guys who I think profoundly affected my life, and Bill Finger is on that list, the guy who created Batman. And yes, I said that, created Batman. And if you want to come and fight me, guys, you come and fight me, because it wasn't Bob Kane. I don't care what anybody says. He might have been Lee saying yeah, I want an insect superhero that crawls on walls. Ditko came up with Spider-Man. Come on, guys, bring it.
Yeah,
but, man. Yeah, Kirby. I've been having conversations with a few people inside of the industry, and every time I mention Kirby and Lee, they're like, "Oh, I don't know. Everybody really liked Jack," and I'm like, "You guys are in the industry, and you don't know." The word on the street, this guy just doesn't get the love, man. He was such a curmudgeon, and I will readily admit that when I saw Jack Kirby's name and I saw Bill Finger's name and the credits of those movies, and I don't even really care about the movies that much, I might have cried a little bit. Just a little bit. I was like, man, I wish Jack could have seen it.
I know.
Just a modicum of that love that everybody showed to Stan for so long.
Yeah, I think Ditko to me was an acquired taste, because I liked him a lot on the early Spider-Mans, and I liked him on Doctor Strange. But it was kind of a Machine Man, was my favorite hero growing up, in the 70s. I think he came out. He was in 2001, A Space Odyssey originally with Kirby, and then Kirby launched the Machine Man. And so the first cover, I even have it on my morning coffee show intro, his arms are reaching out. It's super cool. And so I was like, I just love Machine Man from the get-go. and Devil Dinosaur came around out about the same time, and they're still kind of cheesy, but they're fun. But I was like, after Kirby left, they brought Ditko in, and you couldn't have two polar opposite styles. So I almost couldn't read the Ditko Machine Man just because it was so different and not, that larger than life way that Kirby would draw. Ditko was more like almost an introverted. His heroes seemed they were cool, and the way he drew was cool, but they were very slender. They weren't like the bombastic Kirby that we're used to. So unfortunately, I'd have to say I was kind of let down because I didn't really like the Ditko Machine Man, but I know he contributed in so many ways on other things, but I couldn't get into that take of him on Machine Man.
You know why? Because Ditko couldn't either. They kept calling
Yeah.
it. They kept calling Ditko in to clean up messes because that was after he'd left Marvel, and he only went back to Marvel because obviously he needed the money and he wasn't working with Stan, and he never worked on anything, I think, other than maybe Speedball, that he really gave a crap about at Marvel again. He wasn't willing to get vested.
Yeah, just kind of phoned it in.
Look at his first appearance as Squirrel Girl. I mean, holy God! Oh my Lord!
I didn't even know he did Squirrel Girl.
Oh, wow! If you want to have nightmares, go get Marvel superheroes special winter 98 issue 8 or something like that. And it's like, I think it's like a 12 or 14 page story, but literally she looks like a horrific rendition of the Man Who Laughs. If you remember that, the old silent film that the Joker's based on. He's actually got his face like plastered open with prosthetics. It is horrific. She's got like mime slits across her eyes, and she's just. I remember seeing that and being like, "Holy crap, Steve! Wow!"
Yeah.
Of course, that was around the time he was doing Transformers coloring books, so I don't know how much he was caring about any of that stuff.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I didn't even know the origin of Squirrel Girl. I've seen her like in recent comic books, and I have the Marvel trading card app on my phone, so I'll trade digital comic cards and baseball cards and stuff. So I saw Squirrel Girl on there and going, I don't know who Squirrel Girl is, or I knew who Devil Dinosaur is.
I'm so glad she's finally getting love again. Luna and Devil Dinosaur. Like, they got a new series a while back. I guess they're getting a streaming service, so I'm hoping they bring the comics back. I love Devil Dinosaur. That's like one of my... I cannot help those first like 4 or 6 issues. It's just so perfect.
They're cool.
It's like Commandy on acid. What is happening?
Exactly. Yeah, I love that 70s and 80s Kirby. They're just so fun. You can just tell he was having a good time.
Yeah, he was doing whatever the heck he wanted. Speaking of which, so everything's gone well with the new books that have come out. It seems like, I mean, obviously not like insane print runs, but for anybody wondering, like Venom by Marvel, that sells about 35,000 copies. So 8 to 10,000 copies is nothing to laugh at. Everything has gone well. Our Berserker is getting ready to get funded. Do you have plans going forward from there?
I do, and I don't have them solidified yet, Roman. So I don't really want to say yet. But if I had my dream project to do, it would probably be to bring back the Enchanter series that I did with Mike Dringenberg back in the 80s with Eclipse. And that was kind of a under the radar book that it was Dringenberg's first, pencils and inks. And then after he did Enchanter, he and Sam left. Sam left the Hamsters, and Dringenberg left Enchanter about the same time. And then they teamed up with Neil Gaiman to do Sandman. So now with Sandman coming out as the Netflix show and stuff, I just kind of think this would be a great time to get kind of ride on the popularity of that particular character, to show Dringenberg back in the day, like right when he was doing Sandman, and to show what he did with me on this book. We did like 3 issues, and then it was supposed to be 8 issues, and then unfortunately it stopped. So I would love to repackage that and bring it back to a new generation and finish it like in a graphic novel. So that would be probably my dream project if I parodies, like they come to me and I have to be inspired. It's like if someone just says, parody this, and I think about it and it just doesn't make me feel like I want to sit down and write it, I don't have any interest in it. It has to be something I think that is God strikes me, or the muse strikes me, and I just sit down and it just comes out. So when it's forced, I don't like it, because I feel like if I'm not enjoying writing this, it's going to come out and my fans aren't going to like it. So I like to write stuff that I think I myself would like to read. And so if someone said, Don, I need you to write a parody every month, I don't think I could do it. I think I just have to do it as I feel inspired. So, there's a serious side to me too. I like to do superheroes and fantasy. And so I'd like to show people that I'm not just a guy that, that makes fun of, whatever's popular in the day.
I hope our last interview made that abundantly clear to our viewers, because there really is a lot more to you than just parody press. And, even like I know a lot of people like to laugh at it, but like back growing up in the 90s, like there was Zen was everywhere. That was a big thing. And like that, it was different, and I always thought it was like the one cool thing that could compete in ads next to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which was saying something to me as a kid. So yeah.
Cool, man. That's cool that you said that, because Bill Mouse, who's been doing Zen, is actually doing another project with Steve Stern this year. So they're doing a Kickstarter. So maybe you should have Bill and Steve on one of your shows. I'm sure they would love to talk to you about Zen.
That would be awesome. Some of those
Yeah.
illustrations, especially his ad illustrations that he would do, where you could tell he was just kind of, oh, I get to do whatever I want.
Yeah.
Man, they were great.
Yeah. Well, it's cool that you notice you put Turtles and Zen in the same sentence, because I don't know if I said this on our earlier interview, but Zen came to us through Steve after it was done, published at Archie. And when Archie did it, it was really the kidified, just what Archie did back in the day. If they took the Turtles, they would definitely tone it down from the Eastman and Laird. It was more, all ages and stuff. And so Zen, even though it was an indie book that a couple of guys from the East Coast, like up in Vermont or Maine, were doing, it caught the eye of Mark Friedman, and Mark Friedman is the guy that made the Turtles a licensing phenomenon. So he teamed up with Eastman and Laird when Turtles was starting to take off as a comic book, and then he started saying, "Oh, we can make pajamas, we can make toys, we can get an animated series, we can have the trifecta, we can have toys, comics, and a movie." And so from that, Friedman he made millions. He made millions for him and Eastman and Laird. And so we found out that after Archie was done publishing Zen, Friedman was behind that as well. He actually had an agreement with Zen and Stern and Cody, who are the 2 creators of Zen, to make Zen his licensing baby, because he wanted to duplicate what the Turtles had done. And unfortunately, it didn't take off quite as big as the Turtles, but it had a Nintendo game, it had action figures, it had the comic book line. So we just thought, after seeing how big the Turtles were, that with Entity Comics, that Zen could be our flagship title, and our hopes were that it could be as big as the Turtles. And we rode that success for a while. It wasn't nearly as big as the Turtles, but it did really quite well. We sold, I think, some of the chromium cover books that we did, we sold close to 100,000 copies of Zen. Yeah, like we had a J. Lee chromium cover that was super cool. And it was about the time, when Bloodshot came out, and Valiant did, the very first Chromium, and everybody was going, "Oh, this just looks so different than anything else on the shelf." And so we had to kind of dig around and find out who is this printer that does this Chromium process. And it's a company out of the Southern California, and they did. You probably collected trading cards back in the day, but Topps Finest. They would come out with baseball cards that looked like they were metal engraved, and that was the same company that did the Bloodshot comic. But no one ever saw it bigger than a trading card. They never saw it on a big, comic book cover. And so when that hit, I think Valiant probably sold 1 million copies or something of that comic book. It did really well, and then we kind of found out through the grapevine, going to Comic Cons, that there was a special printer that did this process, but it wasn't cheap. I mean, you had to commit, and you had to know that you were probably going to have to print like at least 30,000 copies just to kind of break even with these guys. So we did a few Chromium covers, and it was fun.
Yeah, man, Zen was everywhere when I was growing up, and it was kind of one of those things where I would see it, and the different artists. I always loved the different artists' interpretation of Zen, because as a kid, I didn't really get it. Every once in a while, Zen was all like, "Hey, yeah, I'm a friendly blue alien, and I got my Donatello staff." And other times you'd see him, and I was like, "Holy God, dude, he looks like he could be duking it out with Spawn." Like,
right.
I think Trent Kanuga, it was the guy who I saw do a couple of pinups of him where I was like, "Oh, what is this?"
Yeah, we had some pretty cool artists that did. We had an Artisan book, and people that you would probably
know that.
Yeah, we did an Artisan that was all pinups, and so some of the people that Steve had lined up even before he came over to Entity, he had Sam Keith do a Zen cover. He had a guy named Nelson that was kind of popular back in the day. He had a really cool style. Frank Bruner, who was the co-creator of Howard the Duck. Mike Mignola, he's another guy that did a Zen cover. So I'll have to find this Artisan book and send it to you, because it's just a laundry list of people that are pretty well-known artists that did their take on Zen. And
That's
yeah, you're
awesome.
right. You're right. There was this sanitized version of Zen that was almost like Captain Planet-ish. And then Steve Stern said, "Oh, I really want to get away from that Archie look." So he came to us and he said, "What can you guys do with this?" And at the time, Bill Mouse was very influenced by Todd McFarlane. And so he drew Zen in Zen #0 a lot like you would think McFarlane would do it. So that's kind of the way we went with it. And then after Bill did his run, it was kind of at the time when Punisher was starting to become a lot more grim and violent. And so Steve said, "Let's push the boundary and get it to be really very, very action-packed and violent." So you probably saw an issue where it almost looked like he could fight Hulk or Spawn, and it looked pretty crazy.
No, it was cool, but it struck me strangely. I did not get it as a kid, where I was like, "Wait a minute." And then when I got about 10 or 11, I was like, "Oh, yeah. Because then there's the black and white turtles that are cutting people in half, and like people are getting murdered. And then there are the guys with the colored headbands." And I kind of put it together. That's insane that it's the same licensing guy, because they interviewed him pretty heavily for The Toys That Made Us, the Netflix original show.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they talked to him on there, and there's another really good interview with him on Turtle Power, the definitive history of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And
Nice.
listening to that guy talk was crazy. He was like you. It was awesome listening to him talk. That amount of hustle and like the mindset and drive that it took to get stuff out there back in the day, people do not understand.
Yeah, I had his direct number, and it was always my dream that he would like take the hamsters under his wing and make it as big as the turtles. And it unfortunately never happened, but he was always friendly. But I just think he had his success was already there. I mean, he had speedboats. He was always going on fishing trips. So he put in a lot of groundwork on making the turtles big. And I think he was just, when I came to him, he was almost I think was kind of getting close to retirement, and he didn't take it on. But yeah, Mark Friedman is like the guy that he just made the turtles everywhere. I mean, it was
People don't
crazy.
understand. They think of like, Eastman and Laird as being completely loaded. And I'm like, I mean, no, not to say that they're poor by any stretch of the imagination, folks. I'm not
Right, right.
implying this or anything, but like, no, that's the guy that's really rich. That's the guy who made out like a bandit because he had I mean, God, he laid the groundwork with everyone and he held on all the way through the Nickelodeon era.
Yeah.
Dude, you rode that through 5 networks, 4 or 5 publishing companies, a complete creator fallout where the creators wouldn't talk to each other. You, sir, are a genius. So, Enchanter,
Yes.
so if you were to go back to that series, would you? Mike is not inordinately busy these days. I just don't see him pop up that much anymore. Would you, be looking to get him or have somebody else fill his shoes or?
That's a good question, Roman, because I actually I don't know how to get a hold of him. I tried to find him online, and I sent him letters to where he used to live, which he can't. He comes from Utah, and then I did a Spokio and looked him up, and there was another address in Oregon. So last year, when I was thinking of doing the Enchanter reboot or repackaging, I really wanted to get Mike involved because I would say it would be great to have him do a new cover or something like that. And so I wrote to these addresses. He's not on the internet. He doesn't have any type of social media. He's a very shy person. So I'm not surprised. And he's so talented. I don't know what he's doing. I don't even know if he's alive. But if you watch this, Mike, and you are out there, please feel free to contact me. I'm on Twitter or YouTube, but I would love to work with him, and I wanted to get his blessing, but I tried and I couldn't find out where he is. Maybe Neil knows. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, man. So many of those guys. It's so weird because it's like Mike is such. I've heard he's such a sweet guy, but I myself have been trying to track down Mike for a year and a half now. You can't find so much as a digital footprint from that guy. That's
No,
impossible these days.
I know. I don't get it. And I don't know if he's a computer guy. I mean, he sent me his portfolio pieces when he was probably 18 or 19, Roman, and I just looked at this guy's work and I said, he mailed it to me because that's the way you did it back then. And I just said, this guy is like the next Bernie Wrightson, and he's only a teenager. And I just went, I got to work with him. So funny enough, I mean, he worked on some hamsters books and kind of cut his teeth on that. But he's probably the best artist I ever worked with between Mike and Sam. Definitely very talented guys.
Well, they used to team up all together, team up together all the time. I mean, if it wasn't for Mike, Sandman would have never gotten done. Sam would have never been able to. I don't think would have been able to power through that. And like
Right.
it was funny to hear Sam talking about that he thought the roles should have been reversed and he should have been inking over Mike's pins. And I'm like, man, Mike's such a great inker. I don't know what you're talking about. He's one of the few guys who ever did justice to Sam's work because he did get that whole Frazetta, Wrightson, very like realistic cartoons. I don't even know how else to explain it. Those exaggerated lines, it's just so gorgeous. I
Kind of
love,
like yeah, like maybe like Bill Sienkiewicz type.
dude, Sienkiewicz is on another level. I don't even, for years, I couldn't figure out, like, where did this come from? And when I was 13 or 14, I started getting really into Hunter S. Thompson. And I don't know if do you read any Hunter S. Thompson or anything?
I've heard of him, and I guess there's a movie with Johnny Depp, right, where he's
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the funny things is that there was an illustrator that worked for Hunter S. Thompson, and his name still is Ralph Steadman.
Oh
And
yeah, I know Stedman's work.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah, Steadman. Well, you've seen his stuff. That's
Sienkiewicz. Yeah,
Sienkiewicz. Like literally for years and years, I was like, how did he go from Neil Adams to that. And finally, I found an interview where at some point where somebody was like, "Have you ever heard of Ralph Steadman?" He was like, "Oh, if it hadn't been for Steadman," and I was like, "I
Ah,
knew it, I knew
ah,
it," because
yeah.
I love watching them both work. It's insane. Have you ever seen Sienkiewicz like do any of his live demos or
No,
anything?
no, I bet it's cool.
Oh my God. It's amazing, but at some point or another, you will have heart palpitations because he'll get out like a bottle of bleach, and you're like, "What are you doing with the bleach? What are you doing with the bleach, Bill? No, dude.
Uh-huh.
Oh, he's dumping it on the page. He just smeared it around. God, you're a
Wow.
genius. How do you even see that? 'Cause
Yeah.
it's half breaking it and then fixing it is what he always says.
That's cool. Yeah, I totally loved his work from the very first time I saw it back. I think New Mutants was like the very first Sienkiewicz stuff that I really liked. And he had that cool ability not just to draw the interior pages, but his cover paintings and stuff were just, I mean, almost like movie posters, like a Bob Peak or Jules Struzan type of uh, talent in his work.
Yeah, it's
I was
cool.
kind of, yeah.
Yeah, Ann Nocenti was just talking about that in an interview I listened to not too long ago, and she was like, "I just loved waiting for what Bill would bring me, and then the only thing better than that was hearing what Jim Shooter would scream through his door when he saw it."
Uh, that's funny. Did you read like the Moon Knights that Sienkiewicz did? Those are really good.
Man, I grew up on that. That's the Sienkiewicz Moon Knight is the reason I'm obsessed with Moon Knight, and it's like you can watch his evolution. That guy just leaps and bounds between when he left and then he did New Mutants and then he came back and did that like kind of second era. Oh my God, his art was just he was firing on all cylinders because that was right around the time of Elektra Assassin. Sorry, totally derailed here. I
We're
will.
just two couple of fanboys. That's all.
I was gonna say I'll sit and ramble about Sienkiewicz all day. And so getting back to like the crowdfunding and interacting with people and learning how to do that again. One of the things that we kind of hit on our in our very first interview was the zine scene from back in the day. And
Yeah.
you were pretty heavily involved with the zine scene. You know, it played into your basically the birth of you getting into comics. And I was kind of
Right.
curious just to like pick your brain a little bit and maybe have you talk a little bit about how things used to work because I don't think that kids under 30 really get like communicating through mail and having to send a letter to a guy who's like, "Oh no, you need to check out this fanzine and then this fanzine needs to check out, how things
Right.
used to work."
Right. Boy, that's a good question that no one's ever asked me before. But if I think about it, it really was instrumental in getting me into comics. So uh, I think I might have said before that my friends that were in high school, we self-published a comic book called Overload, which was it was like our attempt at trying to make What If Mad Magazine and Heavy Metal had a love child. And so that was Overload, and we published about 5 issues of that, and it was a let's see, I think I actually have a copy. This is like our fourth issue. It has a Steve Fabian cover on it, and it's oversized like a Heavy Metal, black and white. And the very first issue was Personovich and I were both big into the Alien movie because it came out like in the late 70s, and we loved that movie. So we spoofed it like, but in a really crude way. I mean, just like a couple of high school kids would do. So it has language and just kind of potty humor and stuff. So it was almost kind of like an underground comic book, Roman. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't for kiddies. It was more for we were kind of aiming for the heavy metal audience, even though we didn't have an iota of the same talent as guys like Corbin and Mobius and guys like that. But we tried. They were our inspirations, and you can really see a lot of Mobius influence in Personovich's work. And he actually, for a high school kid, he really did a good riff on Mobius. A lot of the Overload work, you look at it and you go, this guy was just fresh out of high school, and he was using a rapidograph pen and just putting in tons of detail like you would think Mobius could do. And so, anyways, the way to market these books, if you didn't have a distributor, you would basically try to network with other underground, like they actually called it new wave, because underground was more like in the 60s and 70s, like Robert Crumb, Rick Griffin, Freak Brothers, those guys. So the next wave, kind of coming out of the Bay Area, was called New Wave Comics. And actually, I think Eastman might have even done some of these types of small press type of comics before the Turtles. But New Wave was like a guy named Clay Geertz, who was no longer with us. He was a photographer, and he also was a small press publisher. So he would come up with this newsletter that he would publish every month, and you would send him your books, and he would write a little synopsis about it and let people know where you could buy it. So it was almost like you would just wait every month to get this little envelope that Clay would send you, and it might have 2 or 3 pages printed on colored paper, but it would have like little strips in it. It would have people's artwork in it, fan artwork in it, but mainly it was just people's addresses and where you could send off to get an underground comic book like Overload. So we didn't have the internet. We didn't have the way to let people know this book is out. And so that was the way that you would kind of network with people, is through the mail. And so that's how I kind of got into self-publishing. And the way that Clay said you can make your own comic book is real simple. Is you just take an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and you fold it. Let me show you, kind of like, I'll just take do a sample piece of paper. So you would take you would draw, 100%. You're not going to reduce this. You just draw it to scale. And so you take your 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and you fold it over like this, and then you just cut off the top and you staple it, and you would have an 8-page comic book. So you could either do single panel pages, or you can actually draw sequential art on it. But it was a real cheap way. You could just run it off at Kinko's and send it to somebody and say, I'm charging you $1 for my mini. It's called a mini comic. And so the mini comic is kind of how I got started, just self-publishing. And then, Overload was more, we took it to an offset printer, and that was more of a professional job. But the mini comic was kind of this cool movement of young guys that were actually Valentino was a big guy in Jim Valentino, the guy that was the partner at Image. He was big in the mini comic scene. And that's how I heard about him before he even started to do Shadowhawk or any of that stuff. He was doing these, they're kind of R-rated. I mean, there was nudity and swearing and stuff. So mini comics were kind of a zine in itself. And then the mainstream had zines like, there was one called The Comics Reader, and Mignola used to do covers for that before he went big time. And so I used to get that, and the Comic Book Buyer's Guide, which was a newspaper. I don't even know. I think they still print the Buyer's Guide, don't they? Or do you even know?
I don't think they actually print the Buyer's Guide anymore. I think they quit a few years ago. It bummed me out, man.
Yeah, that was kind of like the lifeline of comic book retailers, because in that, if you ran out of issues and Diamond was out, you would try to network with other comic book retail stores that had extra copies. So you would find people taking out full page ads of inventory that they had, and you would, they had Golden Age, Silver Age, Modern. And so that was almost like the Bible of having, if you were a comic book retailer, you'd have a subscription to the Comic Book Price Guide. But in the Price Guide, they would also have small press ads. So people that weren't with Marvel or DC could say, hey, I've got this comic book that I did myself. And if you're a retailer, you could either buy, multiple copies, or if you're just a fan, just send me, $5 with shipping, and I'll send you my comic book. So that was kind of the way that people would get publicity on their own self-published books. And so zine wise, so I would network, and there's like, I would try to connect with other people that were kind of doing the same thing we were doing. So when Overload came out, we would go down to the Creation Con and that's where I met like people like Sam Keith and stuff. But this is a book that is called High Energy. Have you ever heard of this?
Yes, man, that's got Art Adams' first work in it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. There's a guy named
Yes.
Steve Massaroni he's an excellent artist, and he was the main artist on this. And if you ever get this book and you see Massaroni, you're going, that guy is the guy that's going places, not Art Adams. But Art Adams, obviously, he's big now. And Massaroni, he went more into like more of a fine arts career, and he's really good. But let me just show you this without too much glare. Can you see that? That's Massaroni trying to riff on Wrightson. So Massaroni did about 70 to 80% of the work in here. Art Adams maybe had like a 2 or 3 page black and white book, or a story in here. And, to me, if I was a publisher, no offense, Art, I don't think you were quite ready for for prime time yet. But Massaroni, I thought, really was. And if he would have probably went to Marvel or DC, I think he would have made it big there just as much as
he did one graphic novel that I know of.
Exactly, the Silver Cord or something like that.
Yes.
Oh, you know that. Okay. Yeah.
Dude, and what is absolutely awesome about that is that a buddy of his, one of his like proteges that he taught art to, reached out to me, and hopefully I am getting in touch and am going to be interviewing him. Because literally,
Awesome.
when you pulled that out, I don't know if you saw my face kind of be like, I have been looking for a copy of that for 20 years now, because I am like Art Adams is like a god to me. That and Graphic Fantasy Illustrated are like the two fanzines that I have literally I had never seen in my entire life.
Oh man, I have to dig that out because I have it in storage, the Graphic Fantasy, and that's another kind of roundabout story. Roman, is that with the Comic Book Buyer's Guide, I wanted to write a column for it, a humorous column where I would make fun of comic book characters and stuff. So I'd come up with this column called Superheroes, which was spelled SOOPER. And so every few issues of the Comic Book Buyer's Guide, the editors would run my column, and I would invite people to send me their take on my logo. Like I would have different artists draw superhero logo. And Eric Larson actually did one of the superhero logos for me before he was published. He was a struggling artist and just kind of my age and wasn't quite ready for the big time. But I had heard about this graphic fantasy book that he was doing, and the Savage Dragon. And I have probably like 3 or 4 issues of the graphic fantasy that Eric did, because he was corresponding with me at the time. And so he sent me them, I paid him, and I have them in the Mylar bags. I bet they're worth a lot, right? They're probably worth, so
if they're good quality, like apparently they don't even know how many copies of those exist anymore, because there was a fire or a flood, I forget, and it destroyed 70% of probably what they printed.
Yeah, I would think that in the day, just kind of knowing what small press people were doing. I mean, he probably just did a few hundred of those books. I would. They were like offset. They were really crude.
They just did a reprint of them, a facsimile edition of issues 1 and 2, because I had never read them, and I've been looking for years and years. And after I talked to you, I was like, somebody's got to have a scan of them online, and nope. And then the month after that, looking in previews, and they're like facsimile edition, and I was like, it was amazing reading those issues, seeing how, like, because you talked about how rough that Art Adams is in that high energy piece, and Art Adams is embarrassed to see those books. Like, if you bring a high energy to get signed, he'll sign it, but he's not gonna. Yep, exactly. He's like, oh, sweet Jesus, another one of these. All right. But that is not the case. I mean, those look amazing. Savage Dragon was a character by the time Graphic Fantasy came out. It was insane to see those, especially considering the other guys in those graphic. I don't know how well you remember them, but there's like 3 different stories in each issue or whatever. Oh man, and the other stories like Silverhawk. No, it's not Silverhawk. It's something Hawk. Ironhawk. That's what it is. Combinations of Marvel characters. Like, it is painfully amateurish. Yeah. And then there's Larson.
Yeah, Larson, you could tell he had you could tell he was greatly influenced by Kirby, but he had like the fist coming out of the panels, and you could just tell this guy knows how to make a fun, action-packed comic book, and it's only a matter of time before he's gonna make it big. So then after Graphic Fantasy, I think he hooked up with Gary Carlson, the Megaton guy, and that's I got involved like one issue of that. So it's a really tight-knit crowd back in the 80s, just mail order correspondence guys. And, there was just a bunch of nerds, and some of these nerds went on to, make pretty big selling comic books like Eric. So that's kind of the zine thing that I can recall. I mean, I've got, what else do I have here in this bag of tricks? Oh, okay. Well, this is something that there's a comic book chain in the Bay Area called Comics and Comics, and they were really big. They had like 5 to 7 stores in the Bay Area. I don't even know if they're still around anymore, but every month they would come out. I mean, they were so big, they would actually have their own, like staple printed free giveaway every month to their customers. And you can see this one right here. That's a long shot Art Adams, probably not anything that was ever published by Marvel. I think it's a original piece, because Art grew up with Mignola down in the Bay Area. And so Telegraph Wire was something that I started to get, even though I live like five hours away from the Bay Area. And then I started to write the superhero columns for the Telegraph Wire. And Diana Schutz, who was the editor of the Telegraph Wire, went on to edit at Dark Horse with Bob Schreck. So I met Diana through like cons and stuff. So the Bay Area scene was pretty vibrant. I mean, Northern California, we had, that's obviously where the underground movement kind of started, like with the, Last Gasp. And you might know this, but didn't Leonardo DiCaprio's parents publish comic books? Did you know that?
Yeah, I was gonna say I've heard that before, but I've never been able to find like actual concrete details about that. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that at this point if that's an urban myth or not.
Okay, I don't know either. I mean, I used to read a lot of undergrounds, and I don't ever remember seeing a DiCaprio name. I remember Ron Turner. He did a lot of Slow Death. That was kind of a underground. I used to go to head shops, even though I wasn't a pot smoker. I used to go to head shops just for the underground comic books, and that's how I got introduced to the Freak Brothers and Fat Freddy's Cat. And they would have Overload. I'm not Overload. Actually, Overload was stocked at the head shops. I would try to get it distributed wherever I could. But John Pound, who was a really good artist in the 80s and 90s, and he's probably better known for doing like the Garbage Pail Kids. He's a local artist that lives up here, and we just worshipped him whenever we saw him. He's very, very shy, but super talented. If you Google John Pound art, you'll see his artwork. You'll go, this guy is, no wonder he's doing stuff for Tops and Mad and all these companies.
Dude, his Garbage Pail work is amazing. I loved that growing up.
Yeah, he's a really nice guy, and we interviewed him in Overload, and he actually married my art teacher in high school. One of my art teachers got divorced, and then John Pound married his wife, but they were still nice to each other. So John would actually come in and give interviews. He would speak to our art class, and not a whole lot of people knew who he was, but me and Parsonovich did, because we were in the underground scene, and we knew who he was. So it was fun to kind of rub elbows with somebody that we felt like had made it big, and he lived in our town, which was kind of unusual.
That's awesome, man. It's so funny talking to guys your age too, who are all like, all of you guys that are into comics are like, I never smoked pot, man, but I went to a lot of head shops and bought a lot of comics. I was just talking to Bill Loebs, and he was like, I remember when I moved out to California and everybody told me that where they sold the bongs is where you got the good comics, so that's where I went.
Yeah, there was a place called Fool's Jewels down in downtown Eureka, and me and Parsonovich would hit that place up. And yeah, I used to make movies, Roman, when I was in high school, and they let us film a movie in there that was, you remember The Jerk with Steve Martin? We did a parody of that called The Idiot, and the uh, the guy didn't know what to do with the bong. You know, the guy. It was fun. It was just really we're kind of like Cheech and Chong inspired back in the day. So we did a lot of stupid humor that was, going with the culture of the 80s, and that whole counterculture movement. But I live up in Humboldt County, and that's everybody knows Humboldt County because of the pot industry. But it's funny because Parsonovich, you look at him and you think he was a total drug dealer. But he's pretty straight. He just likes to draw about people that get stoned. He had a comic book character in one of our high school books called Stoner Man, and so he got his powers from smoking weed. Oh, anyways, I'm going off the rails here.
So speaking of kind of like the 80s culture and people kind of coming together, and one of the things that we keep talking about with the underground comics and that kind of become going into the mini comics and the zine scene and all of that, is it kind of seems like that all coalesced in where you guys would meet up at different conventions and that kind of stuff. Was that kind of just like a natural thing that evolved because you guys were all, young and hustling and you guys just happened to be at the cons?
Yeah, that's it. Just you would go to these cons, and if you weren't already published, you would be taking a table at the artist alley. And so these guys that were young, like I told you, Mignola and Adams were guys that were basically just trying to get started in the business. And so they would have these tables, and they'd have their original artwork there. And I remember Art Adams had this beautiful 11 by 17 drawing of like Impossible Man and the Fantastic Four. And you could pick up a full inked piece by him, when he was an amateur guy, and he'd sell it for like $20 or $30. And I bought some of his stuff, and I bought some of Mignola's fantasy work before he did Hellboy and stuff. This was even before Rocket. I think Rocket Raccoon might have been his first break.
That was his big break, but his style had already kind of moved out of that beautiful early sword and sorcery stuff that he had.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I really was attracted to, because I saw he was doing these covers for fanzines. And then when I saw him in person, super nice guy. And I just used to chat with him, and he'd go, oh yeah, I got a date tonight. He was really excited. He was like young like me, and he was just young and hungry. And so all of us just kind of had this mentality, we all want to aspire to be the next John Byrne or whatever. And that's just kind of how we had this camaraderie. And you would just kind of meet these guys, and if they were available to work, you would get their phone number and their address, and you would just call them up once you got back home, and you'd hope that maybe you could collaborate on something. And so that's kind of how I got to work with Sam, is meeting him at the cons, and then just keeping in touch with him, and so that the rest is history.
So as time has marched on and like communication, we were kind of chatting about this earlier, communication is just digital communication even now with this amazing where I'm able to talk to you almost face to face. Like how much has stuff changed? Do you think that people are experiencing like the same amount of because it feels like there's a lot more disassociation between like the moving parts of comics now. And I was wondering if like you had it, if you thought maybe that was related at all to that ability to work so disassembled. as opposed to having to come together and forge these relationships and know these people, and having done even, just fanzines and different weird little tiny fun projects with them.
Can you can you rephrase that, my friend? Because my brain is like I've been doing real estate work all day, so
Back in the day, when people would have to get together and you guys actually had to physically see each other and interact.
Okay.
I feel like that has a much different chemistry when you actually have to be around someone. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
You meet
Gotcha.
them and you know them.
Yeah, I think I understand where you're coming from. Is that like maybe there's not quite as much as almost like a bullpen feel as
camaraderie and like
right.
partnership. Because when I talked to you about adolescent black belt hamsters, it was never I, me, and Parsonovich was doing this or Keith was doing that. It was always we, and me and Sam and me and Parsonovich. And that was, when I talk to people who work now, that's not how I hear things phrased. So I just was curious,
Oh, you're right. That's, I think between COVID and the ability to do so much stuff electronically, that you can create without even seeing someone face to face. But I miss that. I mean, Bill Mouse, who's been working on Berserker with me, we stream a lot. We stream on shows together or on my own show, but I haven't seen him for like 30 years in person. And he lives on the other side of the country. We'll talk on the phone and stuff. But when we were in the trenches at Parody Press and Entity, we did have a studio and we did work. I think we worked a lot more efficiently and it was a lot more fun. These days it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to write a script and I'm going to email it to the penciler. The penciler is going to either do it traditionally, draw it, or he's going to do it digitally, which people are doing a lot more now. And then that person either is going to ink it or we're going to send it to an inker, and then it goes to a letter. We used to have kind of an assembly line back in the day, but to me, it's almost like the internet has made it easier to make comic books, but I don't know if, what would be the word? I don't know if, the end product is quite the same. I think it may be, you look at the stuff that Marvel did, like in-house, Kirby and Lee, and you can kind of just tell these guys were like talking to each other. And now I think because of computers, it's easy to communicate and get work done and so forth. But yeah, I do kind of think that, especially with the big two, I don't really see anything that I'm like that has that same draw to me, like the old school books that we grew up, like the New Mutants or Burns X-Men, Claremont, Frank Miller's Daredevil. I don't really see that anymore. And I think maybe I think that's kind of a lost era. I think everybody is kind of they're their own digital kind of island. and it's, on one hand, it's nice because I don't have to physically be in the same place with Bill to create a comic book, but I miss that. I wish that I could have him come to my house and he can show me his art and we could go over it and stuff. And the stuff that we did back in the zine day. I mean, I had a cartooning class. We were in a class every day of the week, every weekday for at least an hour doing these fun things. And it was like one of the best times of my life. It's just creating and getting the input of these other people, right? I could just walk over to their desk and say, what do you think of this? Or to my teacher. And I think that is lost. And unfortunately, I don't think we're going back to that way of life anytime soon. I think it's becoming more and more digital, and um, the organic feel to the comic books is I think it's unfortunately it's kind of dying away from what you and I remember.
Yeah, and I think you also hit on another thing with feedback. And I think a lot of people have the knee-jerk idea of like criticism or reviews or, negative responses or that kind of thing. And I think when you look at characters that were designed by groups of people back in the day, and that's what happened, they were a couple of guys who got together and designed stuff. You got these cohesive, coherent ideas a lot of times that work, as opposed to characters now, and you hear a lot of jokes about it, but characters that are designed by committee. And I've for a long time, over the last maybe 10 years, as I've gotten more and more into wanting to do research and track people down and get more involved in the industry as far as learning about things and meeting people and trying to discover the real history of stuff. It's amazing to have all this access to people and all this information, but I feel more disconnected from comics now than I did when I had to buy them from one specific shop in town from one guy. And it's taken me a long time to figure out, at least for me personally, why I think that paradigm shift has occurred. And I think, you hit on it perfectly. We are our own digital islands now. And
Right.
I'm afraid that COVID might have really, really driven the last nail in that coffin.
Yeah, because I think you and I probably have these great memories of. I would go to comic book stores if I could, like whenever I went to the Bay Area, and like Comics and Comics was one that I would visit and stuff. But we didn't really have a comic book store in my area, so that's kind of why I started one when I was in college. And so I really loved the interaction with the customers. They would come in every week for their fix, or almost every day. You have the guys that would just basically live at the store. And so they became like family. And if a girl ever came in, God forbid, you wouldn't know what to do. But anyways, I just really missed, that whole retail side of things. And then just starting the comic book company up from scratch, and bringing my wife on board, who really didn't have any comic book background, but she just blesses me because she is so good at the things that I can't do. I mean, I'm not great at Photoshop. I don't even know how to even color a page, and she knows how to do all this production stuff that, if you look at x-farce, she's the one that lays out all the covers and makes sure that the color tones look good when we, come off the press. And it's a lot of quality control that my wife does. And I'm more of the guy that kind of keeps the team together, make sure that we're meeting deadlines, and just kind of the motivator guy that, the team coach. But, I wear many hats. I write, I publish, I edit. And it could be a full-time job, but I don't think I'd have to find something that would be enough to kind of make a living on. And right now, you can't really make a living selling, 1,000 print run book, even if you charge $25 for it, because, that's not all pure profit. You have to pay your artists. And I mean, honestly, a comic book like Berserker is probably, it probably costs more like 10,000 to actually pay everybody and then get it printed and all that. So we're kind of breaking even on it, but I'm not at the level that you see guys like Bill Tucci and Polito and Ethan. And I kind of thought it would be a lot easier than it is, but it's not. It's you have to do the work, and you have to deliver, because if you don't deliver, it's an unforgiving business. I think even Liefeld did a crowdfunder and he didn't deliver on it. and I heard people weren't too happy with that. Did you hear about that, or do you know about that? Or
Yes, I do. And a lot of people like to bag on Rob Liefeld. I stand up for him a lot of the time because I think it's just kind of fashionable to slam on him. And if I were to speak to Rob right now, shame on you, Rob. You took people's money. It's been 5 years and people are still having to ask you for refunds. You didn't bother to do that on a project you knew you couldn't deliver and have moved on from and had other projects since. Shame on you as a professional. I'm sorry, but yes, I do know about that. I know several people. I got into that pretty heavily when I was looking into Shocker Toys. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of Shocker Toys.
Yeah, Bill was telling me, Bill Mouse was saying he was maybe getting a deal with Nira X or Zen with Shocker, and I was looking up people's comments about that guy, and I couldn't tell if he was legit or if he was a scammer. And I saw that you did a piece on. I hadn't actually watched it yet, but I have a feeling that you unraveled a big onion. And it was like he did a Max thing, right, with Sam.
He did this scud right here on the wall, and I was obsessed with it. It is the most accurate figure I had ever seen. I couldn't find one, and they are like $75, $100, $150 all day on eBay, and I'm like, what? There's got to be a story here. So why is this little rinky-dink figure for a book that nobody remembers? Because nobody remembered Scud when I was trying to track these things down. They're still going for $150. And Jeff Beckett Jr. is a professional con man. There is absolutely no other way to put it. He's still around now. He put out Max Toys when it was licensed through MTV, man, through the cartoon.
My gosh.
He's been scamming people that long. The guy is just an absolute monster. He's the kind of guys that you hear about. And I just talked to Dave Olbrich, the guy who founded Malibu Comics. Yeah, and Dave is just such a sweet, sweet guy. And he's in his 60s, and I'm like, the last stuff I knew that you did was this Evil Dead stuff, so I'm looking into a couple of these books that he did, and Space Goat Productions had these board games that came out, $2-3 million they scammed people for. Just skated off. Good Lord.
I couldn't sleep at night. Doing something like that. That's just not the way I roll. And
those people are crazy, man. I always get chintzy back in Kickstarter and stuff. I always do research on who you're backing, man. Because when I did that Shocker piece, when their company folded, they had to change. The first time they changed their name, they did a GoFundMe page that was like to fund, whatever 5 figures. 9 years later, it's still open, deceptively worded to where you can pay for figures that will never be delivered to you because they came out a decade ago.
Wow.
God.
And he's never been prosecuted. I think I did watch kind of your video, and he hadn't had any legal repercussions, right?
One time he had somebody come at him with paperwork, and it was the greatest moment ever. The lawyer who served him went to his San Diego Comic-Con panel and served him his notice in the middle of his panel. You did what? And he was like, I thought I was going to crap in this guy's cereal. And Jeff just took the paper. I, raised my hand for a question, gave him his paper, served him, and Jeff just went on like nothing had happened.
Oh my gosh.
So
did not only did he rip off the consumers, but did the creators ever get anything?
Oh, no. Nobody ever got anything. I know of. Even the paperwork that he got served with, and it's the only legal injunction that I'm aware of that's ever been filed against him. Because I think he keeps things just small enough. It's not worth your time and effort and money to screw with him, even though he's pinging you. And like, he didn't pay the guy who was designing his toys.
Wow.
Like the artist,
That's nuts.
the one guy, the one art, he only had one guy. That was his entire creative department. The guy responsible for 3D modeling, painting, designing, sculpting. Yep, didn't pay him.
That's sad. That's
Like,
sad.
Jesus.
You need to have Bill on, because I think Bill did have interactions with Rob. Not Rob, I'm sorry, with Jeff.
With Jeff, yeah, no, I know he did, because Zen was announced, and like at one point he even showed up on an ad with London Jack on the back of series 2 of the Indie Wave. Their license had expired 4 years before that, and other guys like Zen never even got signed off on.
Yeah.
Jeff just made prototypes and was like, oh, we'll stick it on the back. They're fine. They're indie creators. They'll love the exposure.
Right. Wow. Pretty ballsy. You could talk to Steve and Bill. I'll try to hook you up with their contact info, but
Please do.
I think you'd have a good time interviewing Steve about Zen. And he's still trying to get that thing, I think, made in development in Hollywood. And who knows, maybe, people like aliens. So,
but I think Zen actually is ripe for everybody who remembers it and they want to make fun of it, but they don't know enough about it to make fun of it. And if you gave them something serious and good and well done, like I remember those really early stories that you were talking about where Bill was just kind of very McFarlane influenced and wanting to take it in a different direction. Hit him with something new, man. I think it's ripe.
Yeah.
Ripe.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see. I mean, like I said, they're working on a Kickstarter graphic novel. I think it's called Hard Bounty. And now Zen I think he can talk now, because that was always kind of the awkward thing, is that he had a telepathic way of communicating. So you never see a word balloon coming directly out of his mouth. It was always kind of a bubble, what he was thinking telepathically. And that made it kind of challenging for the artist to draw somebody that, because he didn't have a mouth. I mean, he was like an alien. But I think Steve has kind of changed that. And now he has the ability to talk like a regular person.
So, is there anything that you'd like to hit on, man? I really wanted to pick your brain about the zine scene and kind of how that all has kind of transpired and then kind of morphed into the crowdfunding stuff and your experience. And I wanted to make sure that we got your new books hyped up. Is there anything else you want to talk about, man?
No, I think we covered a lot of different things I wasn't expecting.
Cool.
So hopefully it was a little different than the last couple conversations that we've had. I think the zine thing is that would make a real interesting. If you get into the graphic fantasy thing, are you going to do a documentary on that, or you're not sure yet? Or?
I really, really want to, but even in the facsimile edition, that I know Larson spearheaded himself, because there's no one else who is going to put that out. There's like no information. And Larson, unfortunately, is like just big enough. He's kind of out of my punching class right now, and I can't quite get to him. And I don't know if anybody else except for I keep wanting to say Al Harris, and it's not Al Harris. It might be Tony Harris was one of the other guys he worked on. And I thought I tracked him down a couple of times, but I just don't know enough about it. And like, the more I dug into it, one of the reasons I'm interested in it about it is like companies like CGC, they don't even recognize that as the first appearance of Savage Dragon. It's Megaton years later.
Maybe you could check in with Gary Carlson and maybe do a Megaton type of expose. He just got through, it's like some major health issues, but he's a really nice guy. And, he did Megaton, and then he went on to do Big Bang for Image. And I introduced Gary to Mark Lewis, and Mark Lewis did a lot of covers for Big Bang. And he's the guy that did the X-Cons cover and the card. I don't know which cover I sent you. Did I send you?
No, you sent me it's the red background with the cesspool is on it. And,
okay, yeah. So you got the more, like, we had 3 covers. One was a homage to the original Eclipse one that Bill Mouse did. and then the X-Cons. This is the one that Mark Lewis did, and then you got the one that's more like the Liefeld.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. It was more like Liefeld. Yeah, I would love to talk to Gary Carlson, man. It was a pleasure getting to talk to Dave Olbrich because he was at that table for the Image meeting, and I like getting insight into that stuff that's getting heaped under legend at this point, you know?
Yeah. You'd like Gary because the guys that went through Megaton are just, there was a lot of talented people that he published, and Liefeld's Youngblood, I think, was the first appearance in Megaton.
Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah, dude. That Butch I don't know how you say his name. It is so embarrassing sometimes. That
Geis
Butch
or Geis.
Yeah, guy. I've always thought
he's still doing work. I heard. I loved his stuff. He did. Michael Golden. Obviously, we both love him on Micronauts. But Geis came along on Micronauts. He wasn't bad.
Dude, he had some stuff on X-Men that he would just sneak in. And you're like, wait a minute. When did Liefeld get to be so good? Oh, hey, it's Butch. Butch is killing it again, man. I see him pop up all the time. That's one of the guys I actually have like a list of about 10 guys that I'm trying to track down that I just think are stupid underrated.
How about Pat Broderick? Were you a Pat Broderick fan?
I love Broderick, man. I really
liked him.
It was
Firestorm, and he did Micronauts for a while. Captain Marvel, his Captain Marvel was awesome.
That's really what I was getting ready to say. That's where I fell in love with Captain Marvel because that's just kind of my jam. But, like him and Jim Sinclair was another one of those big guys where I was like, I actually got a reply from Jim Sinclair. I still am in kind of shock about that. I don't know if you ever dug Jim's stuff. He did all.
Yeah, I kind of remember. Was he more of an indie guy?
He was, but like he's probably most famous for being like the guy that made Sam Keith look like Sam Keith for that period where everybody thinks of Sam Keith. Like that was him and Jim. Jim did basically all of his backgrounds and fill-in work. But it was awesome because like the more you look and you pick apart stuff with the artist edition, you can see Jim is just taking over a lot of the later issues on Max and several other things. And he did a lot of independent stuff that I just mind-blowing when you look at it.
I think Sinclair, I have some like fanzine work for him or small press stuff, but I think he was in Sam's Stomping Grounds. I think he's like a Sacramento based guy. So that's probably how he knew. And then Sam introduced me to, on the Black Belt Hamsters Massacre, the Japanese Invasion. We did a one shot with Eclipse, and Sam introduced me to a guy named Ken Hooper, who worked for DC for a while. But on that book, there's a guy named Shep Hendricks that used to hang around with Sam, and he was related to Jimi Hendrix. And so Shep Hendricks actually did some like inking on the Hamsters book. So we just had all these weird rubbing elbows with people that were kind of quasi famous back in the day. But Jim Sinclair, that rings a bell. I think he did some work for smaller publishers, but I didn't know that he worked so closely with Sam.
Yeah, so Jim's basically the guy that whenever anybody thinks of like this quintessential Max with all of those amazing details, and so Jim was the guy who was going in there and hatch marking every one of those bricks so Sam could do those figures and stuff. His work is absolutely him and Steve Oliff have always just, in my opinion, been like the two names that I saw constantly pop up where I don't understand why they're not world famous. I know Oliff's a colorist, so most people.
Wow.
Do you know who Steve Oliff is?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
He
did a lot of work for Marvel, like the super specials and stuff like that. And didn't he do like Weird World, or didn't he color that? Like, was that over John Buscema or something?
Yeah, his most famous work was like he did Akira. He was handpicked by Atomo to do the color reprints for Akira.
That's right.
And that was the first ever computer colored comic book. And like he had to go and kick Marvel in the butt and be like, nope, Atomo wants it, so we got to do. He tricked him. That's how he got Marvel to do it. He was like, he sent samples to Atomo himself. But yeah,
Wow.
he did the Death of Captain Marvel graphic novel, God Loves Man Kills, Steve
Wow.
O, the Sienkiewicz Moon Knight.
Oh yeah, Steve Olaf, you're
That
right.
was Olaf, baby.
Is he still around?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, dude. He last work I know of was on some Green Lantern stuff, like end of last year, beginning of this year. Steve Olaf and like Ollie. I think it's Ollie Optics. It might be
Optics.
Ollie Optics. I don't know because
Yeah.
I've never actually heard it out loud. But man, that's
Roman, I'm gonna have to look at the hamsters issue because I think Jim Sinclair might have been one of the guys that inked that book. So I'm gonna have to go look at. I think that's kind of where it's ringing a bell. One of the guys I didn't really interact with, but Ken had, he's kind of following behind schedule, so he had a bunch of his studio mates work on that book. So Sinclair sounds like he might actually be in a hamsters.
that actually wouldn't surprise me, man. That would not surprise me. Tiny world, brother. Tiny world.
It is. I'll check it out and get back to you and let you know if Jim Sinclair worked on the hamsters book.
Well, thanks so much for humoring me, brother. It's been like 2 hours. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to keep you so long. It's just, I love picking your brain, dude. You're full of stories, and I don't get to talk to people about comics enough, so.
I know. Yeah, this is fun, man. It always goes by fast with you. We have so much to talk about. Someday we'll get together and share the gems of our collection, and it'll be fun.
I was going to say, one day I will fly to your house and flip through your boxes. I will look at that. Oh, dude,
that'd be fun, man.
I would love to see your stuff. And by the way, man, I picked up an issue of Overlord.
Overload?
Overlord.
Oh, really? You found it?
You cannot tell that it's been a 12-hour day at work. Yeah, I found issue 3 for on eBay not too long, in not great condition, but man, I just wanted to say kudos. That is an absolutely awesome.
Oh, really? You have a 3? That's cool, dude.
Oh, dude,
the one that has the dinosaur with the rocket in the dinosaur's anus. I have that down here, and yeah, you could kind of see where we were coming from. I mean, every issue we made leaps and bounds. I mean, the first issue was just, we thought we were the hottest thing since sliced bread, and now I look back on that and I go, what was I thinking? And then as 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, it started to kind of really, really come together.
I just thought it was super cool. I picked it up and I wanted to tell you, I was like, because I heard you earlier, you were like, oh, we were finding our way. Dude, if you guys were finding your way, I'd like, you read enough underground stuff. You should, you know what it looked like when people didn't know what they were doing. You guys definitely.
Thanks, bud. Where did you find that at, on eBay or?
I got it through, what is the name of that stupid selling site? Mercari. I found it in somebody recommended it to me. I guess it's like a eBay alternative or whatever. But but yeah, I was going through a bunch of like independent lots of books on there, and somebody had a bunch of old fanzines. I just love fanzines. There's just no telling what you're gonna find in there, I was looking and I was like, wait a minute.
Overload.
This cannot
Holy smokes. I showed you 4. This is one. This is like the original Overload.
I'm gonna have to find that, man. That's the Aliens parody.
Yeah, if I ever find an extra copy, I'm gonna send it to you. I think we did like 1,000 copies. And
the guy I bought it from said he bought it like through mail order. He was from Canada, and he was like the original owner. It was his son, because his dad had just passed away, I guess.
Yeah, this is the one that you probably.
Yes, that's it. That's it.
That's too crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, we had, the first issue was a bunch of high school guys, and then as we started to get known in our town, then a lot of the local artists that were looking to get their work, they would come to us, and so that centerfold in this book, this guy's super. He's passed since then, but we saw this and we said, man, that would be great if he could let us publish his work. And yeah, we had a lot of fun. Yes, I can't believe you found one of these online.
Hey, man, when I tell you I'm going to be hunting for something, I'm dead serious about it.
Well, hey, bud, it was a good time. Yeah, I'll continue to rock my Uncle Jerk shirt online and give you a plug. You have to come on my show one of these days.
I am
You're probably asleep when I do my morning show. Are you?
Yeah, probably. But I can haul my carcass out of bed. I will get on there one of these days, man. I love chatting with you so much. It'd be a blast.
Yeah, I'll turn the tables on you and we'll have some fun. But anyways, I had a great time again. Thanks so much for your hosting, and hopefully people, if you check out x-farce, Berserker, they're basically x-farce.com, berserker.com. I bought the URL, so
there will also
simple.
be links in the description below, and we've been talking about it, but I didn't bother to ask you about it because I'm an absolute idiot and I've wasted a lot of time yammering. You've also got a really great YouTube channel that has a ton of really cool content, constantly streaming on there, putting up a ton of really cool stuff. There will be a link to that in the description below as well. And
thanks, Matt.
Oh, dude, seriously, cool channel. I pop in there and then check it out, like even when I'm at work on break, because a lot of times I'll be watching it live on my phone. But yeah, there'll be links to all of that stuff, guys. Seriously, I cannot recommend checking out X-Farce Reloaded enough. The packaging was just stellar from top to bottom. Don has not lost a bit of his love or talent for comics. And thank you so much again for being on here again, brother. And as always, guys, I really, truly, and honestly ask only two things. Keep hitting those local shops. Keep reading comics.
All right. Arigato, my friend. Thank you.